Good morning. In my ongoing reviews of 1970s dystopian science fiction movies, let's go back in time to 1971 and The Omega Man, starring Charlton Heston, Anthony Zerbe, and Rosalind Cash, and also Lincoln Kirkpatrick. Um, Very interesting, but not terrific adaptation of Richard Matheson's classic science fiction novel I Am Legend, which had previously been made as 1964's The Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price, and was later remade in 2007 with Will Smith as title I Am Legend. Um, None of them, in truth, is really a very good adaptation of the novel, which is much better. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's about a man named Robert Neville, who's a scientist who survives a mysterious plague which transforms people into the survivors into vampires, and they're after him, and he has to survive. And he's apparently the only living person who is immune to this plague, and that's never really explained fully in the book. In I believe the Vincent Price version, they don't explain it either, but it is explained in I Am in the Omega Man. Um, the Omega Man starts with a war between the Soviet Union and communist China, which takes place allegedly in 1975, and they unleash a biological warfare weapon which creates instant death by asphyxiation to anybody who's exposed to it. Eventually, it drifts over the United States and starts having a devastating effect. Anybody who's affected by it like instantly dies, and uh, Robert Neville is now an Air Force colonel, Colonel Robert Neville, and he is also a scientist working on a cure for the plague. And he has one experimental dose that he's taking to Washington, D.C. On a helicopter. And as he's proceeding, his helicopter pilot is struck by the plague, down by the plague, and the helicopter crashes and he almost dies. He manages in the last few moments to crawl out of the wreckage and inject himself with the one uh, dose of the serum that exists, and he survives. And now it cuts to Los Angeles in allegedly 1977. It's completely devastated. Everybody's gone except for these weird mutants who are referred to as the family. They're albino and they have white eyes, and they only come out at night. They're terribly sensitive to light. They don't imply that they're vampires, but they do apparently appear to have some vampiric tendency, that they don't like garlic, they don't like light, and they can be killed by a stake through the heart. And during the day, Neville seeks out their quote unquote nests and tries to destroy as many members of the family as he can find. At night, he hides out in a kind of a fortress that he's built on the penthouse of a very large apartment building that he's put, barbed wire around. He's got a machine gun and night vision scopes, and it's powered by an electrical generator that he keeps fired up with gasoline that he steals from old gasoline pumps and gas stations. He has a car that he can drive around, and he changes cars every once in a while. And he has a stereo and a lot of modern equipment. The members of the family believe that technology is evil, that the downfall of mankind and the plague was brought on them by technology, and they eschew using anything other than very primitive, like things like catapults, and they don't use guns. They use spears and lances and bows and arrows. Um, they're constantly trying to get at Neville because they see him as a symbol of evil. He's the last man who uses technology and science, and they think those are, the evils that brought down the world. So they're trying to destroy him at night. He manages to fend them off mostly, and when daylight comes, they retreat somewhere. He doesn't know where their main lair is, and he's been seeking it for years, apparently. During the day, he entertains himself by hunting down the family And by doing things like he goes into a movie theater and he powers up the projector and runs the one film they've got left, which is Woodstock, interestingly enough, and he's quoting the lines so that the people are saying on the screen, which is kind of funny. Apparently, the guy who created Mystery Science Theater 3000 got the idea from that scene in the Omega Man where he's watching Woodstock, because he's like kind of making fun of the movie. Uh, and apparently, also the film is one of Tim Burton's favorite film movies. He said if he was stuck on a desert island, he'd want to watch the Omega Man. Um, it's an interesting movie. It's not terrific. The plot has a lot of holes in it, and it doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense. But eventually, Neville is out looking for some new clothing for himself at a department store, and he sees what he thinks is a real woman. But he thinks it might be a hallucination, because he like hallucinated that a telephone was ringing and some other things. He's obviously, going a little bit mad, because he's the last person on Earth. He doesn't have anybody to talk to except himself, and like he plays chess with this statue of Napoleon, which is kind of pathetic. But so he convinces himself it wasn't real. He was just hallucinating. Um, Later, he is captured by the family, and they put him on trial, for using technology, and they're gonna burn him at the stake, literally. And at the last minute, he's rescued by Rosalind Cash, who is the girl that he saw in the department store. She comes riding up on a motorcycle and rescues him out of, I think it's Dodger Stadium that they're gonna actually burn him in, and breaks him out. Uh, but she's telling him, keep your hands to yourself, and unfortunately, one of the things that sort of dates the movie, I should have mentioned this movie was directed by Boris Sagan, who is, amongst other things, Katie Sagal's father. But he was mostly a television director. He directed episodes of Columbo and The Twilight Zone and Peter Gunn and the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and a lot of other TV things. He also made a miniseries called Masada, which unfortunately he passed away before he got to see that. And he was killed in a helicopter crash, ironically, given the events of this movie. But that is, he's mostly a television director, so I'm not really sure he was the greatest person to direct this movie. It's uneven in a lot of places. It starts out very slowly, and then it picks up very quickly, and there's a lot of action. Then all of a sudden, it goes back to being a bit more slow. Anyway, he discovers through Rosalind Cash's character Lisa that there is a bunch of survivors who live outside of Los Angeles in a small community, and they too appear to be immune to the plague. Um, and they're planning to, escape. They're gonna get out of Los Angeles and go somewhere where the plague didn't affect people. Though they don't specifically say where they're going. I think they mentioned at one point they're going up to San Francisco, but I don't remember exactly. Um, so again, now he knows that there are these survivors, and he starts working on the idea that maybe he could synthesize a serum based on his own blood, because he injected himself with the only dose of the experimental, you know, serum. So he starts working on that. And meanwhile, the family is still trying to get him. They make an attempt on his apartment when his generator accidentally goes out, and there's a guy with a spear, and that's Lurking Kirkpatrick, who tries to kill him, and he shoots him at the last minute. He falls off the balcony, but in a scene that becomes important, he leaves the spear. The spear is left by Zachary, the family member, on his balcony. Uh, and he and Lisa go back, and unfortunately, her young brother Richie is starting to succumb to the plague. His eyes are starting to turn white, his hair is starting to go albino, and his skin's starting to turn pale. And Neville injects him with a dose of his blood, and the symptoms slow. They don't completely reverse, but they start to slow. So he starts working harder on the antidote based on his blood, and eventually he's able to cure Richie, who then tells him where the family's center is, but begs him not to kill them. He says, these are just people, and they were affected by the plague, and it's not their fault, and you shouldn't hunt them down and kill them, because they're not animals, they're people. And he goes to plead with Matthias, who is Anthony Zerbe's character, who was a newsreader who was talking about the plague at the beginning of the movie, and now he's the head of the family. And when Richie goes to see them and convince them, hey, there's a cure, and you guys can be cured, they kill him, and rather horribly, he's crucified. And Neville finds him later and is horrified, and now he's really resolved to kill these people because they're evil. He killed a little boy, which is horrible. And so there's sort of an all-out battle that what he doesn't realize is as he is working on the serum, Lisa is starting to turn. She's starting to become a member of the family, and she mutates and goes albino and basically turns him in. And when he comes back to his apartment and they're going to make love, she's let in Matthias and his followers, and they destroy all his equipment. They burn his stereo. They tear up his artwork. They destroy the statue of Napoleon and set his apartment on fire. And he manages to shoot Matthias, he's going to shoot Matthias. He manages to escape, and he jumps down into his little fountain in the courtyard of the apartment building, and he's going to shoot Matthias, and his gun jams. And Matthias finds Zachary's spear on the balcony and throws it and kills him. Mortally wounds him, I should say, not instantly killed. But then Lisa goes back to the followers, and the last thing is he dying. Daylight breaks out, and they have to go hide again. And Matthias, Neville, in his last gesture, hands the leader of the rebels this vial of his blood to use for the serum, and then he dies. It's not a great adaptation. It's not one of the best, in my opinion, of the 70s dystopian films, but it is interesting. It brings up, some interesting ideas, and while it is not, in my opinion, as good as The Last Man on Earth, which I think is the best adaptation of the three of them, because it's the closest to the novel, and Vincent Price just does a fantastic job as Neville. It's still, it's an interesting movie. It's not a great movie. I would rate it maybe 3 out of 5. It's a good try, but it's basically a miss at the end. There are a lot of plot holes, a lot of things that don't make sense. There's a lot of it is a bit dated. There's some, silly 70s, phraseology like, honky for white men and groovy, and, a lot of kind of hippie language, which sort of makes it dated. But it's not entirely terrible, and I do recommend you watch it. Heston does a very good job as Neville, and you see him as a man who's slowly going out of his mind because he's quite literally the last man on Earth, or at least he thinks so until he meets the other people.